Guardians of the Galaxy wasn't supposed to be the smash hit that it became.
What happened?
Of course, box office movies, and Marvel ones in particular, have a great track record of box office success, but Guardians didn't have such lofty expectations. The comics weren't as popular as, say, the Avengers, and the movie wasn't expected to receive the response that it eventually got, doing almost $800 million in the box office.
We're gonna be rich!
Since its 2014 release, a lot has changed in the Marvel Universe, in the way comic book-inspired movies are made, and in the movie business as a whole. And Guardians has played an instrumental role in those changes. Although originally released only a couple years ago, Guardians of the Galaxy was essentially the first of its kind. Nowadays, there are dozens of franchises that follow the same semi-comedic action vibe. But at the same time, they were the first ones to do it. They set the precedent for how a superhero movie can look and feel. To date, there have been 2 Guardians of the Galaxy movies released, with a third one slated for 2020. The gang has also appeared sporadically in other Marvel films, most notably as a whole in Avengers: Infinity War.
Dude.
Director James Gunn and the entire crew are rumored to be back for the 3rd installment. Despite the groundbreaking success of Guardians Volume 1, Volume 2 wasn't as positively received by the masses.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about, but I like the way you say it.
By no means would anyone ever consider it a flop, having actually grossed more at the box office than the first installment, but critics and fans weren't happy. Here's why it's unfair to hate on the second Guardians movie. When you do something new and different, you're gonna stand out. If it's new and different enough, other people aren't going to copy it. Then when you do that thing again for a second time after a bunch of people have already copied you, you seem less original and less exciting.
What?
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 wasn't a failure, it was just a casualty of its own initial awesomeness. Perhaps the biggest difference between Guardians and all of the other comic book movies, at least at the time, was the humor.
But you got some business to attend to before all the nookie starts.
With a handful of debatable exceptions, Guardians was the first superhero movie to be really funny. And I mean really funny.
You're making me beat up grass!
There wasn't just the odd one-liner here and there sprinkled throughout. No, this was basically a comedy disguised as an action movie. And it wasn't like there was just one funny character, there were a bunch. Whether it's Rocket's smart aleck comments, or Star-Lord's lovably endearing style, or Drax's hilariously dry personality, or any other persona's sense of humor, there was no shortage of laughs. I mean, Groot even had a catchphrase.
I am Groot.
Prior to this first movie, superhero films had a different vibe. They were typically very serious and not as self-aware. Sure, Iron Man would have a few sly remarks, but those movies weren't full-blown funny.
Let's face it, this is not the worst thing you've caught me doing.
And we all know that Captain America doesn't have a funny bone in his body. Even look at the Thor movies and how drastically they changed from pre-Guardians to post-Guardians.
I choose to run toward my problems and not away from them.
That's what
2013's Thor: The Dark World was 100% serious and came out a year before. 2017's Thor: Ragnarok, which came out 3 years later, was jam-packed with humor and essentially written like a comedy.
Did you just say the Grandmaster used it for orgies?
Yeah. Don't touch anything.
In fact, the similarities between Thor and Star-Lord Peter Quill don't stop there. Both Chris Hemsworth and Chris Pratt absolutely nail the lovable idiot hero role.
Are you mocking me?
Hemsworth's Thor character is a bit less on purpose, instead of winning audiences over with his brute bluntness, and sometimes brute stupidity. He's essentially the high school jock who fails all of his classes but is great at football. Quill, while also being great at the same type of lovable moron type of angle, is a bit more deliberate about it. He actually has a sense of humor that he wields recklessly, no matter the situation. It's Thor's over-the-top seriousness that makes him so funny, and it's Quill's lack of seriousness that makes him so likable.
Yeah, me.
That's the very specific style of superhero humor that Marvel has nailed, and it's steeped into numerous other films. Perhaps the most notable one, or at least the one that comes to mind first, is Deadpool. When the first Deadpool movie was released in 2016, it completely blew the doors open for what a comic book movie could be. It was silly, it was raunchy, it broke the fourth wall, and made fun of itself. All in all, it was hilarious.
Super penis.
It was also still technically an action movie, first and foremost, although, much like Guardians, it blurred the line between action and comedy. If it weren't for Guardians to pave the way for that style, there's no telling how Deadpool would have turned out.
Dad?
We've already discussed Thor Ragnarok, which was hysterical in its own right. But another Marvel hero that uses humor and wit as much as any other hero uses their superpower is Ant-Man. After all, it's not like they were gonna make a movie starring Paul Rudd and not make it funny, right?
You wanna show me how to punch? Show me.
2015's Ant-Man saw Rudd play the role of Scott Lang, a well-meaning thief who gets caught up in the turbulent world of crime fighting. A major nod of the hat must go to the casting directors over at Marvel. It shouldn't come as a shock that movies starring Chris Pratt, Ryan Reynolds, and Paul Rudd ended up being funny.
I ruined the moment, didn't I?
Even Spider-Man is funny now. If you recall the last iteration of the franchise, it wasn't nearly as witty or silly as the new Tom Holland-led operation is.
Hey, buddy, is this your bike?
Spider-Man is now chock full of one-liners and relatable humor for a younger demographic. Somewhere along the line, Marvel shifted gears and put a much larger emphasis on humor.
What the f?
And that somewhere along the line is when they released Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. It's not even solely Marvel that's gone down a funnier path. Suicide Squad wasn't nearly as dark as DC's previous releases, instead opting to a more fun, colorful punk kind of vibe.
I could tell you meant that.
Although it didn't quite meet the fans' or critics' expectations, it certainly made efforts to get a couple of laughs and give the characters endearing personalities.
That's your ruining date night!
The same could be said for Aquaman, which also didn't fit the typical dark and sinister DC billing.
You that fish boy from the TV?
Much like Marvel did with creating characters around the actors rather than vice versa, DC tried creating Aquaman in the image of Jason Momoa.
It's Fish Man.
They wanted him to embody the character, or should I say they wanted the character to embody him. Therefore, we saw a super fun, personable, and wild version of Aquaman because it was just Jason Momoa. Unfortunately for DC, I don't think either of those films quite lived up to their expectations, but they were definitely both influenced by the trickle-down effects of Guardians of the Galaxy. One thing that director James Gunn has become known for with the Guardians is the incredible intro credit scenes. In the first film, we see Star-Lord wearing a Walkman and kicking around space lizards to a 70s rock hit. In the second film, we see Baby Groot setting up a boombox with the same 70s rock hit playing while some sort of giant space slug wreaks havoc in the background. Both scenes are an icon for setting the tone of the entire franchise. In fact, music plays a huge role in Gunn's ability to make a space movie about war feel so relatable. It's almost as if he started the trend of making the soundtrack a valuable piece to the movie puzzle. Think about it, before Guardians, did any superhero movie have a soundtrack that stood out?
In this harbor town.
Can you name one song that was part of Captain America the Winter Soldier? Probably not, but Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and 2 for that matter had such an iconic soundtrack that it actually became an important part of the movie's release. By the time 2018 came around, the Black Panther soundtrack was produced entirely by Kendrick Lamar and was nominated for Grammy Awards. The music that accompanies a movie is now a major aspect of the movie's release, and that pretty much started with Guardians. At least within the context of superhero movies it did, which is now slowly becoming all movies, right?
Oh, yeah.
Seriously, superhero movies are not so subtly taking over the entire industry. In a recent interview, actress Jodie Foster claimed that superhero movies are ruining Hollywood, and she's not totally wrong. Massive movie franchises have hurt the landscape of the movie industry, especially for smaller budget movies. Jodie learned this firsthand when her film Money Monster bombed at the box office last year. There's just less and less room for smaller movies anymore, as giant titans like these comic book franchises are raking in the cash.
Was this a union thing?
She even goes so far as to say studios making bad content in order to appeal to the masses and shareholders is like fracking. You get the best return right now, but you wreck the earth. It's a bold comparison that likely isn't completely untrue. Marvel has even started monopolizing the actors and actresses who play the roles we know and love. Marvel does a phenomenal job at casting big names to star in their movies, but they also low-key kinda take over those stars' careers. What's the last Chris Evans or Robert Downey Jr. movie you've seen where they weren't Cap or Iron Man? Have you seen Scarlett Johansson act as anything other than Black Widow in the last few years? Even Chadwick Boseman went from being James Brown and Jackie Robinson to being exclusively just T'Challa, the Black Panther, for the past 2 years. It's as if Marvel is slowly taking over the movie industry as a whole and hoarding all the best talent while they're at it. James Gunn even took to Twitter to respond to Jodie Foster's comments. He said that he thinks Foster looks at movies in an old-fashioned kind of way, where spectacle film can't be thought-provoking. What Marvel has certainly proved is that big explosions and epic fight scenes don't have to be mutually exclusive from good storytelling and developed characters. He goes on to admit that most studio franchise films are somewhat soulless, so her comments aren't completely baseless. However, he continues saying that cinema needs spectacle films with vision and heart, thus creating the best of both worlds. And that's essentially what he sets out to do, and not so debatably accomplished with Guardians of the Galaxy. It's safe to say that Guardians set an important precedence when it comes to the way not only comic book movies are made, but all movies in general. It was perfectly able to blend action with heart and depth. It told a valuable story with emotion while remaining silly, fun, and light. It offered huge action, all without going overboard or taking away from its values. It set the tone for how comic movies would get made and has influenced pretty much every one that's come after it, many of which we know and love. How do you feel about action and comedy forging into one genre? Do you think other franchises should get some more credit? Did we forget to mention anything important? Let us know in the comments section down below. As always, make sure to subscribe to the channel in order to get more videos like these. Hit the notification bell so you'll be, well, notified when a new release gets, well, released. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up to let us know. We'd really appreciate it. Until next time, take care.